The Lewis Clark house in the prestigious La Jolla neighborhood towered over the Pacific Ocean as a monument to middle-class success. The three-story sandstone structure with panoramic windows and a perfectly manicured lawn cost $1.5 million. Not an astronomical sum for San Diego, but enough to underscore the status of the owner of Clark's Premium Auto, a chain of 8 auto repair shops, and Pacific Coast Construction, a construction company. At 6 in the morning, 52-year-old Lewis was already sitting on the terrace with a cup of coffee, reviewing financial reports on his tablet. Gray temples and lines around his eyes betrayed his age, but regular gym sessions kept him in good shape. During his 25 years of marriage to Margaret, he had grown accustomed to a routine: early rise, work, family dinner. Now 3 years after his divorce, he still woke up at 6, but he dined alone. "Mr. Clark, the contract documents for Ocean View Resort are ready to be signed," Dave Thompson announced as he entered the construction company's office on Miramar Road. Dave was not just a business partner, but the only person who had known Lewis before he became successful. They had met 20 years ago when they were both mechanics at a car repair shop. "How much will that bring in?" Lewis asked, without looking up from his computer. "About $200,000 net for 6 months' work, but I'm more concerned about your condition than the profit." Lewis looked up. Dave was one of the few people who could afford to be so blunt. "What do you mean? When was the last time you went out anywhere other than work? When was the last time you met a woman?" "Margaret left enough memories of our family life." Lewis smiled, but there was bitterness in his voice. The divorce had been painful. Margaret had demanded half the business, citing her help in the early days of his career when she worked as a secretary at his first auto repair shop. The lawyers eventually agreed on monthly payments of $3,000, not a ruinous amount for Lewis, but enough to be a constant reminder of his failed marriage. "Margaret gets her money on time," Lewis said. "She doesn't want anything else from me." "What do you want?" Dave sat down in the chair opposite him. "A house like a museum, no one around. That's no life, Lewis." But Lewis had already returned to his documents, making it clear that the conversation was over. That same evening, 20 miles from La Jolla, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Hillcrest, Monica Reynolds stood in front of the mirror, getting ready for a meeting with a client. 28 years old, with shoulder-length brown hair and an athletic figure, the result of daily runs through Balboa Park. In the reflection, she didn't see an escort, but an ambitious woman who was using the resources at her disposal to achieve her goal. Monica had been working with Elite Companion San Diego for 3 years. This wasn't street prostitution, but elite escort services for wealthy men, business dinners, cultural events, and sometimes intimate encounters, if the client was pleasant and willing to pay extra. The standard rate was $500 per evening, with intimate services doubling the amount. "Today it's Dr. Williams from La Mesa," the agency manager said on the phone. "Dinner at Addison, then maybe his room at the Grand Del Mar. He's a regular client, no quirks." Monica knew the routine. Meet at the restaurant, make conversation, show interest in the client. Dr. Williams was a heart surgeon, recently divorced, in need of a beautiful companion to maintain his image. A typical client, successful, lonely, willing to pay for the illusion of intimacy. But Monica wasn't thinking about her evening with Williams. She was thinking about her plans. 3 years ago, she had arrived in San Diego from Fresno with $2,000 and a cosmetology diploma. Working in salons barely paid enough to live on. Escort services allowed her to save $80,000, enough to open her own beauty salon. "One more year," she told herself every morning. "One more year and I'll start a new life." Monica grew up in a family where her mother worked 3 jobs to support her 2 children after her father left. Poverty taught her to value money and not judge how it was earned as long as it didn't hurt anyone else. She saw escort services as a temporary investment in her future. At the agency, she was known as a professional. Monica was never late, kept herself in perfect shape, and could talk about anything from politics to art. Clients often requested her specifically, which allowed her to raise her rates. "You could find a rich client and get married," said her friend Stephanie, who worked at the same agency. "Half the girls dream of that." "I'm not looking for a savior," Monica replied. "I'm building my own future." That evening, after dinner with Dr. Williams, Monica returned home with $1,000 in cash. One more step toward her goal. She wrote the amount in her notebook, where she kept track of her savings. $81,300. She was less than $20,000 away from her cherished goal. At the same time, Lewis Clark was sitting in his empty house, flipping through TV channels. His dinner from a Chinese restaurant was cooling on the kitchen table. A house worth $1.5 million, a successful business, financial stability, and absolute loneliness. He opened his laptop and went online without any particular goal in mind. A random ad caught his eye. Elite companions, sophisticated companionship for successful men. Lewis had never considered such services, but loneliness makes people receptive to new ideas. The agency's website featured photos of women with brief biographies. They weren't sleazy pictures, but professional portraits. Monica, 28 years old, educated in cosmetology, interests, art, literature, travel, available for business events and private meetings. Lewis studied Monica's photo for a few minutes. Attractive, but not provocative. Intelligent eyes, a sincere smile. For the first time in a long time, he felt curious about another person. Meanwhile, Margaret Clark was finishing her workday at the Wells Fargo branch in Mission Valley. Her job as a loan officer paid $4,000 a month, a decent salary, but not enough to maintain her lifestyle. The $3,000 in alimony from Lewis was critical. Margaret rented an apartment for $1,500 a month in Claremont Mead, drove a 10-year-old Honda Accord, and bought her clothes at discount stores. The contrast with her former life in a $1.5 million home was painful. "He lives in luxury, and I count every dollar," she complained to her friend Linda over lunch at a cafe near the bank. "And if he remarries, the alimony will stop." "He's not getting any younger," Linda consoled her. "Who wants a divorced man in his 50s? But Margaret knew Lewis better than anyone else. Successful, wealthy, in good shape, he was an attractive option for many women on the San Diego dating scene. The fear of losing her financial stability haunted her. At Pacific Coast Construction, Dave Thompson noticed changes in his partner's behavior. Lewis had become distracted, frequently checking his phone, sometimes smiling for no reason. "Is there someone else?" Dave asked bluntly. "Maybe," Lewis replied evasively. "Who is she?" "It's too early to say." Dave knew Lewis well enough to understand that his friend had fallen in love for the first time since his divorce, and that could lead to problems, not just personal ones, but financial ones as well. Margaret would never forgive her ex-husband for having an affair. 2 weeks had passed since Lewis first visited the Elite Companions San Diego website. Every evening, he opened the page, studied the profiles, but never dared to make a call. The fear of looking ridiculous fought with the acute feeling of loneliness that grew stronger with each passing day. On Thursday evening, after a particularly difficult day, suppliers had delayed materials for a construction project, and one of the auto repair shops had received a complaint from a dissatisfied customer. Lewis sat in his home office and once again browsed the profiles on the agency's website. Monica's photo still caught his eye more than the others. "Damn, this is stupid," he muttered as he dialed the agency's number. "Elite Companions, good evening," a female voice answered with professional warmth. "I'd like to book an escort." Lewis felt his heartbeat quicken. "Of course, sir. What date and what event?" "Tomorrow evening. A business dinner at a restaurant downtown. I have a meeting with a potential investor." It was a lie. There was no investor, but Lewis needed an excuse for himself. "Excellent. Which of our escorts would you prefer?" "Monica," he said without hesitation. "An excellent choice. Monica is very popular with our clients. The cost of the escort will be $500 for the evening, plus your dinner expenses." "Where is the meeting planned?" Lewis named Donovan's Steak Chop House in the Gaslamp Quarter, a prestigious restaurant where he did occasionally meet with business associates. "The meeting time is 7 in the evening in the restaurant lobby. Monica will be wearing a black dress and has brown hair. Payment is cash at the end of the evening." After hanging up, Lewis felt a strange mixture of excitement and shame. At 52, he was ordering the services of an escort for the first time in his life. Monica received information about the new client from the agency manager on Friday morning. Lewis Clark, 52 years old, business owner, Business dinner at Donovan's. First time with the agency, so be extra careful. Standard package, but if he offers more, it's up to you. Monica quickly checked Louis out online. The Clark's Premium Auto Company page, a few articles in the local business press, a photo from a charity event 2 years ago. An attractive man with a confident gaze, clearly wealthy, no scandalous reputation. The standard portrait of a successful divorced businessman. Friday passed slowly. Louis changed his shirt 3 times, called the restaurant twice to confirm the reservation, and constantly checked the time. Dave noticed his partner's nervousness. "Got a date?" he asked with a smile. "A business meeting," Louis lied. "At 7 on a Friday night? Who has business meetings at that time?" Louis didn't answer, but Dave saw something new in his eyes, an anticipation that hadn't been there for months. At 6:30, Louis was already standing in the lobby of Donovan's, nervously adjusting his tie. The restaurant was located in a historic building in the heart of the Gaslamp Quarter, a neighborhood that had been transformed from a rundown area into the center of San Diego's nightlife. High ceilings, dark wood, and subdued lighting created an atmosphere of elegant luxury. At 7 o'clock sharp, a woman in a black dress approached the entrance. Monica looked even better than in the photos, elegant but not provocative, with a natural grace in her movements. Louis felt a sudden excitement he hadn't felt in years. "Louis?" She approached with a professional smile. "Yes, it's me. Monica, I presume." "That's right. Nice to meet you." They shook hands, and Louis noticed that her handshake was firm, not playful or suggestive as he had expected. The maitre d' led them to a table by the window overlooking Horton Plaza. Louis ordered a bottle of Caymus Cabernet Sauvignon for $120. Not the most expensive wine on the list, but good enough to make an impression. "Tell me about your business," Monica said as the sommelier poured the wine. "Auto repair and construction, that's an interesting combination." Louis was surprised. Most people just nodded politely when he talked about work. "I started with a single auto repair shop 15 years ago. Then I realized that many customers also needed construction services, garages, carports, repairs. I decided to expand the business. That makes sense. Synergy between the 2 areas." Louis raised his eyebrows. Synergy was not a word he expected to hear from an escort. "Do you have a business degree?" he asked. "Cosmetology, but I read a lot." Monica smiled. "My clients are often business people. I have to understand their world." The conversation flowed naturally. Monica asked intelligent questions about the San Diego construction market and demonstrated her knowledge of economic trends. Louis talked about the problems of small businesses, competition with large chains, and the difficulties of regulation. "What about family?" Monica asked when the main courses were served. "Divorced 3 years ago. No children." Louis paused. "And you?" "Not married, focused on my career." "Cosmetology?" Monica thought for a moment. She usually stuck to her cover story, but something about Louis made her want to be honest. "I'm planning to open my own center. I'm saving up." "How much do you need to get started?" "About $100,000 for a decent place in a good neighborhood." Louis nodded. It was a reasonable amount for a serious business. Dinner lasted almost 3 hours. Louis noticed that Monica wasn't playing a role, but was being herself, an intelligent, ambitious woman with plans for the future. She, in turn, saw him not as a typical client looking for entertainment, but as a lonely man in need of companionship. "Can I ask you a personal question?" Monica said over dessert. "Of course." "Why did you turn to an agency? You're an attractive, successful man. Surely there are many ways to meet women." Louis was silent for a long time, turning his wine glass in his hands. "After my divorce, I focused on work. I learned not to treat women as people, but as my ex-wife. I thought professional guidance would help me remember how to do it." The honesty of his answer surprised Monica. Most clients either lied about their motives or spoke openly about their sexual needs. "And is it helping?" "Yes," Louis looked her in the eyes. "Very much." When the bill came, $450 for dinner and wine, Louis paid without hesitation, adding a generous tip. "I owe you $500, Monica said in the lobby. Louis handed her an envelope with cash. "Thank you for a wonderful evening." "Thank you. You're very pleasant company." They stood at the entrance to the restaurant, and both felt that they didn't want to part. "Monica, may I ask if we had met under different circumstances? Would you agree to have dinner with me again?" The question caught her off guard. Her professional smile disappeared, replaced by genuine confusion. "I guess I would." "Okay. Then maybe we could meet again?" Monica knew she was crossing a dangerous line between work and personal life, but she nodded. "I'd like to." The next day, Louis called the agency and booked Monica for Saturday night, then Monday, then Wednesday. Over the next 2 weeks, they met 6 times, formally business dinners, but in reality dates between 2 lonely people who had found understanding in each other. Monica was breaking her own rules. She usually kept a professional distance from her clients, but Louis was different. He didn't try to buy her like a thing. He treated her as an equal. He told her about his plans, asked her opinion, and took an interest in her dreams. "You're falling in love with a client," Stephanie warned Monica after she turned down other jobs for the 4th time that week. "Don't be silly," Monica replied, but she knew her friend was right. Louis also felt the change. For the first time in years, he woke up with anticipation. He planned where he would take Monica, what he would say to her, what questions he would ask. Work took a back seat. "You're glowing," Dave remarked. "Who is she?" "A special woman," Louis replied. "Seriously?" "Maybe. Just remember Margaret. If she finds out about a serious relationship..." "Margaret is none of my business," Louis snapped. But Dave could see that the warning had hurt him. In the 3rd week of their relationship, Louis invited Monica to his home instead of a restaurant. He cooked dinner himself, grilled steaks, salad, and good wine. Monica came without an agency. It was their first informal meeting. "Beautiful house," she said, taking in the panoramic view of the ocean. "Too big for one person," Louis admitted. They dined on the terrace under the stars. Monica talked about her childhood in Fresno, about her mother who worked 3 jobs. Louis talked about how he built his business from scratch, about his fear of ending up with nothing again. "Why did you get divorced?" Monica asked. "Margaret wanted a different husband, more ambitious, more social. I disappointed her expectations." "What did you want?" "A family, a house full of laughter, children who run out to greet their dad when he comes home from work." There was such longing in Louis's voice that Monica felt the urge to comfort him. She took his hand. "It's not too late." "At 52? Of course it's not too late." That night, Monica stayed with Louis for the first time, not for money, but because she wanted to. They made love slowly, tenderly, like people who had been searching for each other for a long time. In the morning, Louis made breakfast, and Monica felt at home. "What's happening to us?" she asked. "I don't know," Louis replied honestly, "but I like it." Monica knew she was teetering on the edge of a precipice. Falling in love with a client meant jeopardizing all her plans. But Louis made her happy in a way she had never experienced before. By the end of the month, they were seeing each other 3 times a week. Louis no longer paid the agency, and Monica came to him as a woman to a man. But officially, she continued to work with other clients, and that was becoming a problem. "Quit your job," Louis said one morning. "I'll help you with the money for your center." Monica froze, pouring coffee. "Are you serious?" I couldn't be more serious. She knew she was on the threshold of a new life, but something inside her warned her against making hasty decisions. 2 weeks after Louis's proposal to quit escort work, Monica was still hesitating. She sat in her Hillcrest apartment on Saturday morning, looking over her bank statements. Her savings had reached $87,000, just $13,000 shy of her goal. "If I take his offer, I'll become dependent," she told herself, but her heart told her otherwise. Over the past few weeks, Louis had become a part of her life in a way she hadn't expected. He wasn't just offering money, he was offering a partnership. He discussed business plans for her beauty salon, advised her on the location, and even put her in touch with an architect to design the interior. "The Mission Hills area is perfect for your target audience," Louis said over breakfast at his house. "Wealthy women who are willing to pay for quality services. I know the owner of the building on Washington Street. We can take a look at the space." Monica saw his eyes light up when he talked about her plans. Louis took her dreams seriously. not as the whims of a lover, but as a real business project. But independence was a matter of principle for Monica. Her mother had depended on men her entire life. First her father, then a series of boyfriends, each of whom promised stability and disappeared, leaving behind bills and broken hopes. Never rely on a man completely was the main rule of her childhood. But Louis was different. In the 2 months they had known each other, he had never tried to control her decisions, was not jealous of her past, and did not demand reports on how she spent her time. He just cared. On Saturday evening, Monica went to Louis's place for dinner. He was cooking lasagna, a dish his mother had taught him 20 years ago, the only complicated dish in his culinary repertoire. "I've made a decision," Monica said, as they sat on the patio with glasses of wine. Louis froze. "And? I want to try, but with conditions." "I'm listening." "It's a loan, not a gift. I'll pay back every dollar with interest when the business becomes profitable." Louis smiled. "Agreed. What interest rate would you like?" "Market rate, 10% per annum." "Too much. 5. 8. 7, and we're done." They shook hands like business partners, but Monica saw something more than business interest in Louis's eyes. "When are you quitting the agency?" "I'll hand in my notice on Monday. I'll finish my current assignments, and then I'm out." Louis nodded, trying to hide his relief. The thought of Monica spending her evenings with other men caused him physical pain. On Monday morning, Monica called the agency. "I'm quitting," she told her manager. 2 weeks to finish my current commitments." Reason? "Personal circumstances." "A client?" "Monica, be careful. A lot of girls think they've found Prince Charming, only to find they've just traded one addiction for another." Monica understood the risks, but her mind was made up. Meanwhile, rumors of Louis's affair began to spread through San Diego's business circles. The city was large, but the elite circles remained relatively small. Louis appeared with Monica several times at prestigious restaurants, and people began to notice. "Who's that girl with Louis Clark?" Sarah Mitchell, the wife of a major developer, asked Margaret Clark during a chance encounter at the Westfield UTC shopping center. Margaret's heart skipped a beat. "What girl?" "The beautiful brunette. They had dinner at the Prado last week. They looked very close." Margaret tried to remain calm. "Louis hasn't mentioned anyone special." "Well, maybe it's too early." Sarah smiled with an expression that said, "I know something you don't." That evening, Margaret called her mutual friend, Linda. "Have you heard anything about Louis's new girlfriend?" "What have you heard?" "Sarah Mitchell saw them at a restaurant." "Oh my God, Margaret, you knew this would happen sooner or later." "No, I didn't!" Margaret exploded. "He's used to being alone. I thought he didn't have time for a relationship." Linda paused. "But seriously? What if he gets married?" This question had been bothering Margaret for several days. Under the terms of the divorce agreement, alimony would cease if Louis remarried or she got married. At 48, with a mortgage and loans, losing $3,000 a month meant financial disaster. The next day, Margaret took the day off from the bank and drove to the Pacific Coast construction office. She knew Louis's schedule. On Wednesdays, he usually had meetings with the foreman until 3 in the afternoon. Dave Thompson was leaving the building when Margaret pulled into the parking lot. "Margaret? What a surprise," he said without much enthusiasm. Dave had never liked Louis's wife, finding her mercenary and manipulative. "Hi, Dave. Is Louis here?" "He's at the construction site in Carlsbad. What's going on?" Margaret hesitated, but her curiosity got the better of her pride. "I hear he's got someone else." Dave studied her face. "Is that any of your business?" "We're friends, Dave. I'm just worried about him." "You mean you're worried about alimony?" Margaret blushed. "That's not fair. It's fair that Louis is happy for the first time in 3 years, and you want to ruin that because of money. I don't want to ruin anything. I just want to know how serious it is." Dave shook his head. "Very serious. And if you have any sense, you'll leave him alone." Margaret drove away in a daze. Dave's words confirmed her worst fears. Louis wasn't just having fun, he was building a serious relationship. That evening, Louis told Monica about his plans. "I want to buy a piece of land in Del Mar to build a luxury residential complex," he said. showing her the blueprints on his tablet. It's a big investment, about $2 million, but the potential profit could be as high as $5 million. Where will you get that kind of money? A bank loan plus my savings. Plus, Dave agreed to invest his share. Monica saw the excitement in Lewis's eyes. After months of depression and routine, he was planning for the future again, building ambitious projects. What if something goes wrong? There's always a risk, but at 52, I can't spend the rest of my life playing it safe. Monica understood that she had become part of this new chapter in Lewis's life. He wasn't just in love, he had started dreaming again. There's something else, Lewis said after a pause. What? I want you to move in with me. Monica almost choked on her wine. Are you serious? Yes, you have a tiny apartment. I have a huge house. You pay $1,500 in rent. I pay $3,000 on my mortgage. It makes sense to pool our resources. Lewis, we've known each other for 2 months. Long enough to know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The words hung in the air. Monica felt her heartbeat quicken. Are you proposing to me? For now, I'm proposing we move in together. We'll see how it goes. Monica needed time to think about the proposal. The relationship was developing too quickly, but her feelings were real. Give me a week, she said. Sure. The next day, Dave drove to Lewis's construction site in Carlsbad with a serious expression on his face. I need to tell you something, he began when they were away from the workers. I'm listening. Margaret came by yesterday. She asked about your new girlfriend. Lewis frowned. What exactly did she want to know? How serious it is. Lewis, she's afraid of losing her alimony, and a scared Margaret can be dangerous. She gets her money on time. She doesn't need anything else from me. According to the divorce settlement, the payments stop if you remarry. I'm not getting married. But you're planning to? Lewis paused. Maybe. Then be careful. Margaret isn't the type to give up without a fight. Dave's warning proved prophetic. That evening, Margaret called Lewis at home. We need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About our financial obligations. I hear you're seeing someone. My personal life is none of your business. It is if it affects my alimony. Lewis felt irritated. Margaret, I've been paying you on time for 3 years, not a single late payment. And I want it to stay that way. Don't do anything stupid, Lewis. What do you mean? Don't fall in love with the first girl who comes along. Think about the consequences. Lewis hung up without answering, but the conversation ruined his mood. Margaret knew how to push his buttons. That evening, he told Monica about the call. Did she threaten you? More like a warning. Margaret is afraid of being left without money. Are you afraid of her reaction? Lewis thought for a moment. Number. But I don't want her to cause you any trouble. Monica took his hand. I'm not going to hide from your ex-wife. Okay, but be careful. But On Friday evening, Margaret drove to La Jolla, intending to talk to Lewis in person. She parked near his house and saw the lights on. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway, a white Honda Civic. Margaret sat in her car for half an hour, fighting the urge to approach the house. Finally, her determination won out, and she rang the doorbell. Lewis opened the door in his sweatpants, clearly not expecting visitors. Margaret, what are you doing here? I want to meet your new girlfriend. Lewis heard footsteps behind him. Monica was coming down the stairs in his shirt, barefoot, her hair tousled. The picture spoke for itself. This is Monica, Lewis said. Monica, my ex-wife, Margaret. Monica held out her hand to shake his. Nice to meet you. Margaret studied the girl with a critical eye. Young, beautiful, confident. The complete opposite of what Margaret had expected to see. Likewise, Margaret replied coldly. Can I talk to you alone, Lewis? You can say anything you want to say in front of Monica. Fine. I want to know how serious your relationship is. Lewis and Monica exchanged glances. Serious enough, Lewis replied. Are you planning to get married? Margaret, that's none of your business. It is my business when it comes to my alimony. Monica realized for the first time the magnitude of the problem. Margaret wasn't just a jealous ex-wife. She was fighting for her financial survival. Mrs. Clark, Monica said calmly, I understand your concerns, but Lewis's relationship with me should not affect his obligations to you. That's nice, but the law says otherwise. Margaret turned and left, leaving behind an atmosphere of tension and menace. "She's serious," Monica said as Margaret's door closed behind her. "I know, but I won't let her dictate how I live my life." Deep down, however, Lewis knew that Margaret was capable of anything to protect her interests, and that worried him. Monday, October 15th, began like any other workday for Lewis Clark. At 7 in the morning, he was already checking his email in his home office, planning his meetings for the week. Monica was asleep in the bedroom upstairs. She had spent the weekend at his house, and Lewis was gradually getting used to having someone else in his space. At breakfast, Monica announced her decision. "I'm ready to move in with you," she said, spreading jam on her toast. "But I want to pay half the household expenses." Lewis smiled. "It's a deal. When do you plan to move your things?" "Over the weekend. I don't have much stuff." "Great. I'll clear some space in the closet." Lewis kissed her goodbye and drove to the office with the feeling that his life was finally making sense. At 52, he felt young again. At the Pacific Coast construction office, Dave was waiting for him with a grim expression on his face. "We've got a problem with the Del Mar project," his partner said. "The city council rejected our zoning plan. We'll have to rethink the whole concept." "How critical is it?" "A delay of at least 3 months, additional costs of about $100,000. Lewis frowned. The Del Mar project was his most ambitious investment, and any delay meant serious financial losses. "Are there any options?" "We're working with the architects on a new plan, but we need to be prepared for the project's profitability to decline." Lewis spent the rest of the day in meetings with architects and lawyers, trying to find a way out of the situation. He didn't get home until 8 in the evening, tired and irritated. Monica greeted him with dinner and a glass of wine. "Hard day?" she asked, seeing his condition. "Problems with the Del Mar project. It could cost us a pretty penny." "How serious is it?" Lewis explained the situation. Monica listened attentively and asked intelligent questions. Her support helped him relax. "We'll get through this," Lewis said. "It's not the first time I've faced difficulties in business." "Of course you will. You have experience and a reliable partner." They had dinner on the terrace, discussing Monica's plans for the beauty salon. Lewis enjoyed her enthusiasm and attention to detail. At 9 o'clock, Monica drove home to pick up documents for a meeting with the landlord of the new premises, scheduled for tomorrow. Lewis stayed home, working on documents for the Del Mar project in his office. At 9:30, the doorbell rang. Lewis opened the door and saw Margaret. She looked agitated. Her hair was disheveled, and there was a strange look in her eyes. "Margaret? What's wrong? I need to talk to you. Right now." Lewis hesitated. "Now's not a good time." "Please, Lewis. It's important." He let her in. Margaret walked into the living room, looking around nervously. "Where's your girlfriend?" "Monica's at home. At her place." "Good. Then we can talk in private." Lewis sat down in the armchair opposite the sofa where Margaret had settled. She looked tense. Her hands were shaking. "What did you want to talk about?" "About us. About our commitment to each other. Margaret, we agreed on everything 3 years ago. I pay child support on time. You live your life. What if I don't want to just get money? What if I want more?" Lewis frowned. "What exactly do you want?" Margaret stood up and began pacing the room. "I want you to stop seeing that girl." "What?" Lewis couldn't believe his ears. "Margaret, you can't demand that." "I can. 25 years of marriage means something. You can't just write me out of your life for some random woman." "Don't you dare talk about Monica like that." Lewis stood up abruptly. Margaret saw the anger in his eyes and realized she had gone too far. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm just so scared." "What are you afraid of?" "That you'll marry her. That I'll be left all alone." Lewis felt a mixture of pity and irritation. "Margaret, you have a job, friends, a life of your own. You can't build your happiness on my loneliness." "But I can't live without alimony. My salary isn't enough to cover all my expenses." "Then find a better job, or get married yourself." "At 48? With my debts?" Margaret laughed hysterically. "Who would want me?" "Margaret, I understand your problems, but I can't sacrifice my happiness for your financial comfort." "Happiness?" Margaret raised her voice. "Do you think that girl loves you? She's an escort, Lewis. She sells herself for money. She doesn't work for the agency anymore. Of course not. Why would she need several clients when she has one rich fool?" Lewis felt his blood boil. "Get out of my house, now." "No!" Margaret blocked his way to the door. "I'm not leaving until you promise to break up with her." "You're crazy." "Maybe, but I won't let you ruin my life for some prostitute." Lewis grabbed Margaret by the shoulders, intending to drag her out of the house. She broke free, stumbled back, and tripped over the coffee table. "Don't touch me." "Then leave willingly." Margaret looked around the room with the eyes of a hunted animal. On the mantelpiece were photos of Lewis and Monica taken last weekend at Balboa Park. Happy faces, hugs, kisses. "You put our photos out?" she asked quietly. Lewis looked where Margaret was pointing. Their photos had been on the same mantelpiece before. He had taken them down a month ago and replaced them with photos of Monica. "Margaret, you've erased me completely. 25 years of marriage and not even a photo remains." Margaret's voice took on a dangerous tone. Lewis felt alarmed. "Our marriage ended 3 years ago. You wanted it. I wanted you to change, to be better, not to find a replacement." Margaret grabbed one of Lewis's photos with Monica and threw it on the floor. The glass shattered into pieces. "Margaret, stop!" But she was already reaching for the next photo. Lewis tried to stop her, and they began to struggle. Margaret was smaller, but her desperation gave her strength. "Let go! Stop breaking my things!" In the struggle, Margaret stumbled back toward the fireplace. Her hand found a heavy bronze statuette, Lewis's award from the Chamber of Commerce for his contribution to local business. "Lewis, please," she begged one last time. "Don't marry her. I'm begging you." "No." Something broke in Margaret's eyes. Years of pent-up resentment, fear of loneliness, and despair over financial problems all came together in a moment of madness. She swung the statuette. Lewis saw the movement but didn't have time to react. The blow struck his temple with such force that he immediately lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Margaret stood over the body of her former husband, holding the bloodied statuette in her hands. Blood spread across the marble floor of the living room. "Lewis?" she whispered. "Lewis?" But there was no answer. Lewis Clark was dead. Margaret sank to her knees beside the body, unable to believe what had happened. She sat there in a daze for several minutes, then panic began to take over. She wiped the statuette with her scarf and put it back on the mantelpiece. She checked it for traces of blood. She gathered the pieces of the broken photograph and threw them in the trash can in the kitchen. At 10:30, Margaret drove out of the driveway of Lewis's house. No one saw her arrive or leave. The nearest neighbors lived 300 yards away. Monica returned home at 11 o'clock. Lewis's house was plunged into darkness, which she found strange. He usually waited for her to return. "Lewis?" she called as she entered through the front door. There was no answer. Monica turned on the light in the hallway and saw that the living room door was ajar. "Lewis, are you here?" She entered the living room and screamed. Lewis was lying on the floor in a pool of blood, motionless, his eyes open. Monica rushed to him, felt for his pulse, tried to find signs of life. Nothing. With trembling hands, she dialed 911. "Emergency services. How can I help you?" "I need the police and an ambulance. My friend is dead. He's been murdered." "What is your location?" Monica gave the address, trying not to look at Lewis's body. "Stay on the line. Services are on their way." The first police car arrived 8 minutes later. 2 uniformed officers cordoned off the crime scene and called for detectives. Monica sat on the patio under the watchful eye of one of the officers, trying to compose herself. Detective Sarah Johnson arrived half an hour later, a 38-year-old woman with 15 years of experience in the San Diego Police Department. She specialized in homicide investigations and had a reputation for being a thorough and principled investigator. "Miss?" she said to Monica. "Reynolds. Monica Reynolds." "Did you find the body?" "Yes. I came back around 11 and found Lewis in the living room." "What was your relationship with the victim?" "We were dating. We were planning to move in together." Detective Johnson wrote down every word. "How long had you been in the relationship?" 2 months. Where were you tonight between 7 and 11? First here, having dinner with Lewis. Then I went home to get some documents. I came back and found this. Johnson examined the crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry. Valuables were still there, and the murder appeared to have been the result of an argument or conflict. The murder weapon was a heavy statuette on the mantelpiece, on which technicians had already found traces of blood. Did Mr. Clark have any enemies? I don't know. He seemed like a very peaceful man to me. Any problems in his business? There were some difficulties with one project, but nothing critical. Johnson questioned the neighbors, but no one saw or heard anything. Lewis's house was isolated, which ensured privacy but made the investigation more difficult. By 2 o'clock in the morning, the body had been taken to the morgue, and Detective Johnson focused on gathering information about the victim and possible motives for the murder. The next morning, Dave Thompson arrived at the office and discovered that Lewis had not shown up for work without warning. His attempts to reach him by phone were unsuccessful. Dave drove to his partner's house and saw police cars. "What happened?" he asked an officer at the entrance. "Who are you?" "Dave Thompson, Mr. Clark's business partner." The officer led him to Detective Johnson. "Mr. Thompson, I have some sad news. Lewis Clark was murdered last night." Dave turned pale. "How did it happen?" "It's unclear at this point. Can you tell me about his personal life? Did he have any problems or conflicts?" Dave told him about Lewis's affair with Monica, Margaret's concerns about alimony, and recent business difficulties. "Do you think the murder was related to his personal relationships?" "Possibly. Margaret was very upset about Lewis's affair." Johnson wrote down Margaret Clark's name and contact information. A circle of suspects began to form. By Tuesday evening, Detective Johnson had a preliminary picture of what had happened. Lewis Clark was killed between 9 and 11 p.m. on Monday by a blow to the head with a heavy object. The killer was familiar with the victim. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle. The main suspects were Monica Reynolds and Margaret Clark. Monica had access to the house, knew Lewis's routine, and, as it turned out during the investigation, was the sole heir to his estate under a will drawn up a month earlier. The motive was to receive an inheritance worth about $3 million. Margaret Clark had financial motives. She feared losing her alimony if Lewis remarried. But she had an alibi. She was at home on Monday evening, as confirmed by a neighbor. "Check Reynolds' alibi," Johnson ordered, "and find all of the victim's financial documents. I want to know the exact amount of the inheritance." The investigation was gaining momentum, and all the evidence pointed to Monica as the prime suspect. Wednesday, October 17th. Detective Sarah Johnson was reviewing case files in the conference room of the San Diego Police Department. The third day of the investigation brought more questions than answers. Monica Reynolds had been arrested the night before on suspicion of murder. Her alibi, a trip home to get some documents, was not corroborated by witnesses. The motive seemed obvious: a $3 million inheritance, including Lewis Clark's house, business, and investments. "The will was drawn up a month ago," reported Detective Martinez, Johnson's assistant. "Clark was advised by his lawyer to make changes due to his new relationship." Who knew about the will? The lawyer, Clark himself, and presumably Reynolds. He could have told her. Johnson studied the photos from the crime scene. Something didn't feel right. The murder looked impulsive, the result of a sudden quarrel, but Monica seemed too calculating for such an uncontrolled act. What about the ex-wife, Margaret Clark? Her alibi has been confirmed. A neighbor saw her at home at 10 p.m. They were watching TV through the wall. The sound was loud. Johnson frowned. "Check again. What exactly did the neighbor see?" "The lights were on, the TV was on. Nothing specific." "Talk to her again, and check the surveillance cameras on the route from Margaret's house to La Jolla." While Martinez did the additional checks, Johnson decided to question Monica Reynolds in the holding cell herself. Monica looked exhausted. 2 days without sleep, the stress of being arrested, and the grief of losing Lewis had turned the elegant woman into a pale shadow of herself. "Miss Reynolds, I want to discuss your actions on Monday evening again. I've already told you everything several times. Tell me again, what time did you get home?" "I got home around 9:30. I was gathering documents for a meeting with the landlord of the space for the beauty salon." "How long did that take?" "About 40 minutes. The documents were scattered in different folders. Did anyone see you? Neighbors? Acquaintances? Monica shook her head. The neighbors downstairs were home, but I didn't talk to them. Johnson wrote down the answers, analyzing the possibilities for verification. Tell me about Mr. Clark's will. What will? Didn't he tell you that he left you all his property? Monica's eyes widened. What? No, he never mentioned a will. The reaction seemed sincere, but Johnson had seen enough good actors among criminals. $3 million is a serious motive for murder. I didn't know about the will. And even if I had, Lewis was planning to live another 30 years. Why would I kill the goose that lays the golden eggs? The logic was sound, but it didn't rule out a spontaneous murder following an argument. That evening, Martinez returned with the results of his additional investigation. Margaret Clark's neighbor is confused, he reported. She says she saw a light and heard the TV, but upon further questioning, it turns out she took a sleeping pill and went to bed at 9. Johnson sat up straight. So the alibi is bogus? Looks like it. And the gas station camera on Miramar Road caught Margaret's car at 10:40 p.m., heading away from La Jolla. Excellent. Bring Margaret Clark in for questioning, immediately. Margaret Clark arrived at the police station at 9 in the evening, accompanied by a lawyer, a young, ambitious attorney from a small firm. My client is ready to cooperate with the investigation, the lawyer said. Excellent, said Johnson. Then explain, Mrs. Clark, what you were doing on Monday at 10:40 p.m. on Miramar Road. Margaret turned pale. I was at home. This is a mistake. A surveillance camera filmed your car. The license plate matches. Margaret glanced at her lawyer. Maybe someone stole my car. Without your knowledge? Did you report it stolen? No, but Johnson placed a photo from the camera on the table. The quality wasn't perfect, but Margaret's car was clearly visible. That's your Honda Accord, Mrs. Clark, and that's you driving. There was a long silence. The lawyer whispered something in Margaret's ear. All right, Margaret finally said. I drove to Lewis's house on Monday evening. What time? I got there around 9:30 and left at 10. Why? I wanted to talk to him about personal matters. Johnson sensed that Margaret was on the verge of confessing. What personal matters? His new girlfriend. I was worried that he might get married and stop paying alimony. And what happened during the conversation? Margaret was silent, struggling with herself. The lawyer tried to stop her, but she had made up her mind. We had an argument. Lewis refused to end his relationship with Monica. He said I had no right to interfere in his personal life. And I lost control. He tried to throw me out of the house. We started fighting. Johnson leaned forward. What happened next, Margaret? Tears streamed down the woman's cheeks. I didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. Tell me exactly what happened. Lewis was pushing me toward the door. I tripped over the coffee table and fell toward the fireplace. I grabbed the figurine to defend myself. He came closer and I hit him. How many times? Once. He fell right away. I tried to wake him up, but he didn't respond. Johnson wrote down every word. What did you do after that? I panicked. Then I wiped the statue and put it back. I cleaned up the broken glass from the photo I had broken during the fight. And you left without calling an ambulance? I was in shock. I couldn't think straight. The lawyer tried to stop his client's confession, but it was too late. Margaret Clark, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Lewis Clark, Johnson said, reciting the official formula. The next morning, Monica Reynolds was released from custody. The charges against her were dropped in connection with Margaret Clark's confession. Johnson met Monica at the prison exit. I apologize for the mistake in the investigation, said the detective. You did your job, Monica replied. I understand that all the evidence pointed to me. What are you planning to do next? Monica looked at the gloomy prison building. I don't know. Lewis is gone. Our plans don't make sense anymore. What about the inheritance? I'll turn it down. I don't want money stained with blood. Let his distant relatives have it. Johnson watched Monica walk away. It was rare to meet people who were willing to give up $3 million on principle. A week later, Lewis Clark's funeral took place. Monica came to say goodbye to the man who could have changed her life. Dave Thompson organized the ceremony. Lewis had no other relatives left. "He was a good man," Dave said to Monica after the service. "He deserved happiness." "Yes, he did," she agreed. Margaret Clark was charged with manslaughter. Given her clean record and mitigating circumstances, the prosecutor offered a plea bargain in exchange for a 7-year prison sentence. In her holding cell, Margaret sat on a narrow cot, realizing the magnitude of the disaster. In an attempt to keep her alimony, she had lost everything: her freedom, her job, her reputation. Lewis was dead. Monica had lost the love of her life, and Margaret would spend the best years of her life in prison. "If only I had let him go," she thought. "If only I had accepted the loss of money and started a new life." But it was too late for regrets. Monica returned to work at the beauty salon, abandoning her plans to start her own business. She didn't take Lewis's money. The inheritance went to his cousin in Portland. "Are you sure?" her friend Stephanie asked. $3 million. "I'm sure," Monica replied. "That money won't bring happiness." Dave Thompson sold his construction company and moved to Arizona. Working in San Diego had become unbearable. Too many memories of his deceased partner. Lewis's house in La Jolla was sold 6 months after the murder. The new owners didn't even know about the tragedy that had occurred in the living room overlooking the ocean. Detective Johnson closed the case and moved on to her next investigation. Her file now contained another solved story about how ordinary people become murderers under pressure. A year after the tragedy, Monica met architect James in a cafe near Balboa Park. He was a kind, understanding man who didn't ask unnecessary questions about her past. Gradually, Monica learned to trust and love again. Margaret Clark was serving time in a state women's prison. She would be released in 5 years for good behavior. She would work in the prison library, help other inmates with paperwork, and try to atone for her sins. But Lewis Clark would never return. His dreams of family and happiness died with him in the living room of the house that was supposed to be the start of a new life. The love story of a Texas entrepreneur and an escort ended in tragedy that could have been avoided if people had learned to let go of the past and accept the inevitable changes in life.